Across 8 separate decades, 3 generations of the Robinson family encountered something unnatural lurking close to Cross Village, Michigan. Something with significance to years ending with a 7. There have been many reports of a half-human, half-canine creature with a scream-like howl roaming in Michigan's Lower Peninsula. However, what happened to the Robinson family was different for one reason. It seemed personal. In 2009, Carter, Noah, and Ellen Robinson shared their horrific encounters. These encounters were recorded by Ellen and stored on several separate devices for future bloodlines to find if they chose to. These are those accounts, told in the order that they occurred. 1937, Carter Ambrose Robinson. I was 10 years old when I learned that there were horrors in this world, ones that we cannot begin to understand. And I lived in a Cross Village with my ma and twin siblings, Bobby and Nancy, and it was just us 4, and had been that way since Pa left. I say left, but it was Ma who made him leave. He was a good man, but good men can't always resist their demons. In Pa's case, it was drink. When he lived with us, it was normal for him to spend all his earnings in the pub and come back barely able to stand straight. The smell of liquor festering on his skin and his clothes, and I don't blame my ma for packing his bag and making him leave. He only had one place, though, he could go and stay. His hunting cabin was bordering the Wilderness State Park, and I idolized my pa, and I secretly blamed Ma for giving up on him. Life was difficult without Pa there, And Mom was now always stressed, and as such, if I wasn't at school, I was doing chores or minding the twins or never getting any gratitude in return. I eagerly awaited the 3rd Friday of each month as I got to see Pa on that day, and he was meant to meet me by the tunnel of the trees, and it's a dense canopy of trees curved by fire, so he could walk with me to his cabin. And sometimes he'd show up, and the faint smell of liquor on his clothes, and other times he failed to show at all. Ma made it very clear, if he wasn't there, I must come straight home and not venture through the trees by myself. And Ma was in a real foul mood, and the twins were acting up. I didn't want to go home. I wanted to see my pa. And as time ticked by and the sky began to darken, I knew that he wasn't going to show. I stared from that path back home, and then the route through the trees, and I made my choice. A choice that, unbeknown to my young mind, would forever change my view on the world. I arrived at his cabin around dusk, and I instantly knew that something was wrong. I could sense it. And silence surrounded me as I took a deep breath and I knocked on that cabin door, and the silence vanished. And then these different sounds replaced it. It sounded like hammering. Sounds coming from within the cabin that seemed to make the wooden walls shake. And I knocked on the door shouting, "Pa, it's me, it's Carter." I don't know if he heard me through the noise, but I tried the door and it was locked. But I could tell that something was blocking it from the other side. And there was only this one window on the cabin around the other side, and so I walked over to it, and my heart was pounding at the thought of being stuck out there alone all night. And I regretted my decision to come out there, and I feared the wrath I could receive from Ma as a result. And the hammering began again, and as I looked at the window, I realized what it was. There were planks of wood covering it from the inside, and one moved just enough for my pa's bloodshot eyes to peek through and see me. And the next thing I remember was a plank being pulled to the side, and the window being creaked open, and my father grabbing me and pulling me through that small hole. And as soon as I was inside the cabin, he started hammering the plank over the gap I'd just come through, trapping us in the dark. And I could smell this damp wood and days-old liquor, and when the hammering stopped, I heard Pa pace across the cabin and cock his rifle. And I was trembling as he sat next to me on the hard floor, and he slurred in my ear, "Boy, you shouldn't have come here. Beware the year of sevens. Ha, it wants me dead." Your grandpa saw to that. He made the thing mad. And then he lit a match, illuminating this horror of his ransacked cabin and his bloodied, scratched body. He was this patchwork of gashes and wounds. And he reached for his bottle, and as the match went out, I heard him glug back that liquid. And then he kept on whispering, "It's coming. It's coming. It's coming." And I was terrified. I just sat there trembling, not knowing what else to do. And I heard that howl first, coming from outside. It wasn't a coyote or a wolf, and it was almost human, but no, not quite. And this made my paw speed up his whispered words, and he crawled in front of me, blocking me in his shadow, and I stayed there curled up and afraid, and the howling screams were tarnishing this night, and the door burst open in one swoop, the wooden planks offering no sanctuary, and I couldn't see it, not behind my paw, but I could hear its presence. These deep breaths, these heavy footsteps, and this looming shadow. It carried in the dusk light. It almost reached my toes. Sevens. It's in the sevens. Die, omen of death. Pa muttered that, and then he fired his rifle, and I heard this howl-like scream. It was one that seemed to make the whole cabin tremble. And then I heard Pa scream as it grabbed him and pulled him across the floor, and that's when I saw it. It was neither fully human nor wolf. It towered high on two legs, its dark fur making it seem like a shadow, and I felt its amber eyes boring into me, and I thought it was going to take me, but it never did. It slung my bleeding, limp, lifeless paw over its shoulder, and it took him instead. I stayed in that exact spot all night, curled up in a shivering ball. And it was Ma's brother Jack who found me late the next day. When I hadn't returned home, Ma had sent him to collect me. And what he found was a child full of fear and the bloody trail left by my paw. He torched the cabin, saying that it was better that way. And he used Pa's liquor to do it. And we watched it burn to the ground. It was taking my pa's memory with it. And then he carried me home. And in this haze of the lingering, burning smell and vivid greens, and I repeated under my breath, "Sevens. It's in the sevens." Even though back then, I had no idea what that could mean. 1967, Noah Ambrose Robinson. For most of my life, it was just me and Mom. She never really dated, and she didn't say much why, but I knew my dad had put her off relationships. She said that he was the kind of man that, despite his troubles, he wasn't able to commit to a family. And I knew that it was because that he never got over losing his father, my grandfather, at such a young age. I just didn't understand why he never tried to make an effort with me. And on the few times that I did see my dad, this awkward silence seemed to surround us, and I ended up just wanting to be anywhere else. I still traveled from Ohio to Cross Village once a year, usually in the summer, to see my dad's side of the family and to stay with my Aunt Nancy. I don't really know if I even liked going there. My cousins weren't really that nice to me. Yet every year I still went there without fail. And I don't know, maybe I just didn't want to feel exiled due to my dad. But that summer, I had just turned 15 and I felt like such a misfit. Girls didn't like me, and I wasn't sure if I liked girls. And Uncle Bobby's son, Milton, was arrogant and, at times, cruel. I latched on to him, though, like wisteria, not because I liked him, but because I found myself drawn to his friend, Ray. Aunt Nancy's daughter, Shelly Ann, hung out with us for what I presumed were the same reasons. We were this strange group of four, following Milton's orders, as half of us pined for Ray, and none of us ever said no to him, which is why we ended up on the border of Wilderness State Parks, on the remains where Milton claimed that our great-grandpa's cabin used to be. And he insisted that we camp out there, and when Shelly Ann seemed anxious about this, he called her out on being childish and a wuss. And as she was small for her age, she took that personally, and she went along with whatever he said after that. Milton ordered us around, making us collect branches for a fire, and it was exhausting, and I was glad the night started to fall and I could stay still, and I could watch the flames crackle. And when Ray sat next to me and offered me a lucky strike, I took it from him, blushing as my fingers accidentally brushed against his, but he didn't pull away. I felt a spark, one that I'm certain Ray shared too, and Milton saw this. I could see the glee reflected in his fire-glinted eyes. My heart collapsed at that moment, because he knew my secret, and this meant that he owned me. And I think I would have done anything to stop him from telling anyone. It turns out, I didn't have to. I needed to get away from Milton, so I said I needed to pee just so I could take the only flashlight that we had and walk through the trees. And I heard footsteps behind me, and I turned around, hoping that it was Ray, and dreading that it was Milton. It was neither. Instead, it was Shelly Ann, eyes full of rage as she screamed at me that I ruined everything, and she shoved me into a tree trunk. I think she was talking about Ray, but at the time I didn't know what she meant by it, and in the end, it didn't matter. I felt something tickling my neck, and I jerked away, and Shelly Ann saw it too, these tufts of black fur caught in the branch, and I ran my fingers over it. I was wondering what animal it could be from and how it got tangled up so high, and that's when the screams came through the trees. This howl, it was almost human-like, and shrieks, one's notably human, one's in the midst of pain. And I grabbed Shelly Ann's arm and I pulled her through the trees, and this area around us fell silent. It was too silent. It was silent enough so we could hear our hearts thudding over the sound of our running footsteps. And then we ran into camp, or what was left of it. The fire was now smoldering flickers and ash, and Ray was curled up. He was gripping his legs with one arm, and in his other hand he had gripped a trembling knife. It was Milton's for slicing branches, and splattered around this fire were blood and gut remains, and the smell fresh and rancid all at once. And through the massacre, I tried to work it out. Ray had no bloodstains on him at all, and Milton was gone. I tried to pry that knife from Ray's hand, but he wouldn't let me take it. He wouldn't tell us what happened either, but in our hearts, we already knew. No teenage boy with a blunt blade could cause this much destruction. It was something else. It was something not human. And we stumbled back that night. Shelly Ann and I had to walk Ray back. His arms were slung around us. His remaining strength was being used on gripping the knife that he refused to let go. And I carried him on his knife-holding side just in case, but I knew that he was no threat. And I still remember Uncle Bobby's wail when I told him what had happened. He disappeared in the trees for days, but found only blood and guts and shreds of Milton's check shirt. Authorities said that it must have been a bear that did it. We all knew that wasn't a bear. And the night after it happened, my dad rang me. The conversation was short, but I still carry his words with me. Sevens. It always comes in the years of sevens. My pa said that his father did something to start this, and I don't know what, but Noah, you stay away from there. And I rarely saw my aunt, uncle, cousins, Ray, or my dad again after that. And I know Shelly Ann and Ray went on to marry and have a baby, Ellen. Maybe it was easier for them this way. I went back to Ohio and I tried to bury my past. And even now, all these years later, I still wonder if it was my disliking towards Milton or just the way that I was that caused that creature to come and unleash its savagery. 2007, Ellen Rose Robinson. I knew my parents met through grief, but I just didn't know any more than that. Growing up, my Uncle Milton's name was no more than a whispered word that caused my mom to tear up and my dad to fall silent. I didn't question this, just as I didn't question their lack of closeness of touch with each other. Back then, their notion of love was all I knew, so I just thought that that's how love was. It was only when I grew older that I saw the cracks in their foundations. It was a secret that we all knew, but we knew better than to ever mention. I used to visit my great-uncle Bobby, and I think I was the only one who did. He still lived in Cross Village, in the house that he grew up in, and it was haunted by the ghosts of his own regrets. And I knew he would never leave that place. It was something was keeping him stuck there. This invisible thread, it was formed of grief and mystery. And Mom didn't stop me from visiting him. She just made me swear that I would stay in Cross Village and never venture beyond the tunnel of trees. That was a promise that I never intended to break. Even though age was not on Uncle Bobby's side, he remained nimble-bodied, refusing to let the notes of time disable his body as they did his mind. And I was used to his eccentric ways, his ramblings about sevens and his frenzied thoughts stuck in the past. And then when I showed up at his house on this rainy May evening, he was worse than normal. There was something that had riled him up, but he couldn't explain to me what it was. And then he laid a shotgun on the table, and he searched the cupboards, throwing contents of them onto the floor until he found this box of bullets. I tried to calm him down. I offered to make him some food, but he slid past me as though he hadn't seen me at all. And as he loaded that shotgun and he marched out of that house and into the rain, I knew I couldn't let him go off by himself. I ran into the rain after him. I was weed-like in height and build, and even though he was far older than me, he was strong-willed. I couldn't overpower him. So I decided to focus on keeping up with him. I didn't register where we were until I saw that constant green around me, and that's when I knew I had broken my promise to Mom. He was persistent in his walking. The shotgun was swinging by his side as he brushed past the trees, and when he finally stopped, the sky was this silent shade of gloom that it turned before darkness fell, and he sat on a rock in a clearing, and not knowing what else to do, I sat next to him, and he balanced his gun between his knees, and he pointed over to a spot of overgrowth and brambles croaking out. My pa's cabin was over there. I was just 4 when he died, and I never went in that cabin. I was too small to come out here, not like Carter. And I patted his shoulder, not knowing what else to do. Milton, my son, died here. I found bits of him, but never a body. The dogman has it. It has parts of us all. It's been plaguing our family for decades. A curse in 7s. And Carter thinks it was because of my grandpa and something that he did, but I don't know. All I know about my grandpa was that he lived for the hunt. Well, I didn't say anything. I mean, what words were there to say? The night trickled on in a downpour of darkness, and we must have sat there for hours, both soaked through to our skin. I knew I couldn't leave him, and I had to give him time, but I found myself daydreaming about warmth and normality. And then through these thoughts, I heard rustling through the trees, and I looked up, and I saw an outline of something unfamiliar. It was dog-like as it was human, but it was too menacing to be either. And its eyes were looking right at me. Its glowing amber eyes. And although I was terrified, through my panic, I went to nudge Uncle Bobby to warn him, but I only touched air. He wasn't there. I don't know when he left. I must have been too cold and terrified to notice. And then the creature continued to stare at me, and I found myself gripping my fingers into the wet bark behind me as I stared back. I was too afraid to break eye contact. I thought I was going to die, yet all I could think about was how mad Mom would be that I broke my promise. And then gunshots echoed through the trees. 3 in a row, and the creature backed up, and then it broke eye contact, and then it fled through the trees. And then shortly afterward, I heard howls and screams fill the air, animal and human, and I ran, sodden footsteps, as I called my uncle's name. And I wanted to find him, but I knew that I wouldn't. I knew it was too late. And then I reached the road, collapsing beneath the tunnel of trees until headlights flickered to a stop right in front of me. A search party looked for Uncle Bobby, but they never found a trace of him. Maybe it was the rain that washed it all away. I don't know, but I think he died out there. One way or another, I think he went there to die. And I still think about those glowing amber eyes, and when I do, I blink to try to just forget about them. None of my family live in Michigan anymore, and I don't think any of us will ever go back. Not unless we feel compelled to go there. I want to warn them not to go. This pain has to end with us, else I fear that it'll never stop. For centuries, dogman sightings have been reported throughout Michigan. This towering creature walks on two legs, has the head of a dog-like being, and the body of a human, with amber eyes and a howl that resembles a human scream. And it most commonly appears in years ending in a 7. One of the first dogman sightings was in Wexford County in 1887, when 2 lumberjacks reported seeing a dog-human hybrid. The Robinson family experienced great loss that was attributed by the law to excessive drinking, a bear attack, and a cognitive degenerative condition like dementia. There are no surviving records on Carter and Bobby's great-grandpa, as the archive where these were stored went up in flames over a century ago. Even his name is untraceable. No one alive is left to recall it. And if the dogman chose to target the Robinson family, then to this day, well, it remains unclear as to why. The Michigan woods holds many secrets, but the Robinson family's burden feels different, doesn't it? Personal, targeted. If you've heard whispers of similar mysteries, whether from the Great Lakes or your own hometown, or the stories that they used to tell you when you were young, let us know below and subscribe to help us keep these accounts alive. There are more families out there, more mysteries that refuse to stay buried, so please share for more scary horror stories, and we'll see you in the next video.